Hello, everybody. Praise bacon. Welcome to day 29 of 30 of Get Out of the Rat Race Rut. Oh, almost done. We're never done. I'm Beth Campbell. I'm a career mindset coach and mentor. I'm a former corporate captive, now helping you find fulfillment and also still looking myself, truth be told. If you need some guidance in finding your career or happy life, send me a message. A DM or go to bethancampbell.com/coach me. Don't forget there's an Ann in E, Beth Ann with an E, Campbell.com, coach me, all one word. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching live, let me know you're here in the comments. If you're watching the replay, give me a hashtag replay. And of course, let me know if you have any questions or feedback so I can address it either today or tomorrow, because that's it. We're done. I'll always address it though. You can always send me something and I'll make sure to get you an answer. Okay, today I've got to jump right in because today we're talking about the huge cesspool known as job hunting. So if you didn't know, I have had a podcast for the past 4 years that was born out of corporate chaos and my need to vent about just the shit show that I was in. It is called Cafe Grit. It's kind of on sleepy time right now. It's a hiatus, just I'm working on a lot of other things. It will come back. And one of the very first episodes, in fact, I think it was episode number 2 and 3. I talked about, this is 19, oh God, I'm dating myself now, 2020. I was talking about the hiring process because it was such news then. I didn't think it could get worse, but I was wrong. So there are so many of you who have been caught up in this nightmare. Thought I needed to cover it again. So many things that are wrong with the hiring and the job hunting process. I honestly almost don't even know where to begin to start. I'm just going to cover the major points, but there is a lot to unpack here. The hiring process is horrible, both internally. I say this as a former hiring manager, and externally, most certainly for the job hunter. I'm going to focus on the job hunter today, although some of my message would do well to fall on the ears of maybe some managers and HR. Mm-hmm. Okay, jumping right in. What are the worst complaints that I hear as a railing against the machine corporate ranter career coach? Okay, what are the worst things about the job from the job seeker perspective? Number one, by far, job listings and job postings are a shit show, and we're going to dive into that. Deep into the pile of shit, right? People haven't done interviews in years, so they get laid off or they're looking and they don't even know how to prepare, right? So that's another big thing. Interviews themselves, specifically the questions, outdated, in most cases meaningless, sometimes bordering on the ridiculous. How many interviews? That's a big thing too. People having to go through 3, 4, 5 or more. I mean, what a racket. It takes forever to get through all of the phases. And then my favorite, in quotes, my favorite, is that you never hear back. You go through this whole process and then you never hear back. You just get ghosted. All right, let's just dive right in and see if we can at least maybe come up with some tips for navigating the hiring process from the job seeker point of view, or at least make sense of it, which I'm not sure about the making sense part because it doesn't. And I will caveat this, as I always do, I'm not a recruiter. I don't really focus on job seekers in my career coaching, although I have helped job seekers. But as always, I am here to help you with whatever you need. All right, let's start with the job posting or the job listing. My biggest advice to you is just be cautious, especially if you're out there like on Indeed, especially LinkedIn. I don't know why LinkedIn is just a haven for crap, but be cautious for job listings and job postings. There are a lot of postings out there that are fake, they're misleading, scams. Here are just a few red flags. A lot of people are talking today about posts that have job postings that have a link to do a required credit check where you might enter sensitive personal information like your government ID. Word according to Beth, reputable companies not going to make you do a credit check before you apply, right? I would just be really careful because sometimes you're giving out information and it's not really to the company. So there are positions where you do have to do, they will require a credit check, but I would not, I would not do that in a link in a job listing. No, no way. Somebody's going to steal your identity. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to really steal your identity. I'm just saying be careful. Any job that says remote might not be remote. Even the company that I worked at once, we didn't even have an option for remote, even though we had remote position. So just, and the same goes with if it says hybrid, there might be an option. So it always serves to ask, right? But a lot of times you'll see remote or, and it might truly be a remote job, but then you look at the fine print and it'll tell you that you have to live in the location or the city where the company is located. So is that really remote? I mean, I guess, but if you don't live in the city where the company is, then I guess you would have to move. If a company name isn't given, I would be suspicious because, again, there are a lot of scams out there. If you're asked to pay a fee for an application, I would flee. Fee equals flee. Just remember that. I wouldn't pay a fee. And then an unsolicited listing that you might get in a text or email or a chat or like somebody put something. My local Facebook group, notorious. There's always somebody putting something out there for these fake Amazon or fake envelope stuffing jobs that pay, $25 an hour to stuff envelopes. That's bullshit. Don't click on any links, just like any phishing or any spam, and don't give out personal information. Just assume it's a fraud, right? Indeed.com has a great list of, I think it's 17 job scams, and I'll try to remember to put it in the comments. But if you just do a search on job scams, it's probably the first one that'll come up. But it's Indeed.com has a great list of just many more because there are so freaking many, right? What else? Don't be afraid to ask the recruiter or the HR person or the contact about salary or hourly wage if it's not listed in the job position. You don't want to waste their time and you don't want them to waste your time if the salary isn't in your range. I applied for a position about midway through my 23 years, actually a little bit more midway. But anyway, I put my minimum salary requirement in the application. It was a trusted company, and when I talked in the first screening with the HR person, she was very open with me. She said, "Look, the job is $20,000 less than what your minimum was." She gave me the amount. I appreciated that so much because I was like, okay, I'm not going to I was already lowering my salary just to get out of my current job. I wasn't going to lower it another 20,000. So I thanked her and I said, I appreciate that. It was the first time somebody that had ever been that forthcoming. And what happened was she actually went to the hiring manager and explained that, I had dropped out, and he said, "No, we can go that high. We can I just had to understand that I would be, much closer to my market reference value, which would impact maybe raises and stuff." And so I ended up getting hired at my salary requirement. So always ask. And if they can't give you something, consider that a red flag. For an otherwise normal listing, like if I'm on LinkedIn or other job sites, I always would go to the direct company site and check the posting to make sure it's legit and it's worded the same. In addition to the scams, there are rumors out there that companies are posting on job sites or putting out postings on job sites to indicate that they're growing, but the posting is actually fake. I don't know if that's an urban legend or not, but I always go, just like when I get an email that seems really, really, really legit, even if there's not a link and I'm 99.9% sure that it's truly from my bank or whatever, I will always go to the source and see, get the notification from the actual website that I trust. So don't be afraid to check. And if you're on LinkedIn, looking at a posting, I would wonder, is the posting connected to the official company page? So I believe you have to have a company page in order to recruit or post in LinkedIn. So go to the company page, just fresh, right? Pull up the company page in LinkedIn and see if that job is listed in their listing. If it's not, I would be a little concerned. I'm not saying that it's 100% not legit, but I would be concerned. And then just as a side note, I would take a copy of the job posting like print it out or take a digital copy, particularly the duties and the skills, and then save it for when you go to the interview, because sometimes what you see listed in the posting doesn't match at all what the hiring manager is talking about. So it's really good to have that as a reference and say, well, yeah, I'm confused. This, it said I was going to be doing this and you're saying this. So that would be it's just a little tip, right? Okay. So let's talk about preparing for the interview for those of you who have not been in one in a long time. Obviously, shore up your resume, right? There are plenty of templates out there, people who can help. I am not a resume expert, but generally speaking, commonly use action words, focus on your accomplishments, be succinct, use keywords, make sure your paper resume matches LinkedIn mostly, right? Hiring managers and recruiters, of course, and HR, they are looking at your LinkedIn profile. And if it's starkly different, it just might raise a little bit of a question, right? Even if you're not active on LinkedIn, at the very least, if you're on LinkedIn, make sure that your resume is up to date, your experience. You don't need 30 years of history. It's certainly not detailed history. I would say 15 is plenty. And then if you have other history, what I do with me is I just bullet it, right? I'd give the relevant history of the job that I'm posting for in detail, 10, 15 years, and then I just put bullet points for the remainder, and then you can talk about that in the interview if you want. On your resume, and I've seen this too many times, so I'm going to say it, if you are not a newbie, a new grad, new to the industry, whatever, you don't put an objective. That is old school. You would put a summary or a branding statement, and I'm sure that resume experts can tell you even better advice, but don't use an objective unless you're a new grad, right? Maybe. And even then, I don't know if I would. I wouldn't use your picture. It can introduce unconscious bias, and I don't mean like in the obvious ways. I mean, it can do that too. But I had one of my marketing people at one of my jobs gave me some really good advice once. And she said, you never know when you're going to look like your hiring manager's estranged brother or ex-husband or ex-wife. So it's just a good idea to maybe not put it in there. Okay, so what other prep? So bring some examples of your past work, if applicable, and if you are able, right? That's always helpful if you're going to be doing something and you say, well, look, I created this template and here's what it did. And then look up the 20 or so most common interview questions and practice answering them. Unless you're applying it like Google or Microsoft or Apple, you're probably going to get asked at least some of these questions. One of the interviews that I did when I was switching jobs was with an HR rep. I did exactly that. I went out and looked up like the 15 or 20 most common. In fact, I don't think I looked them up because I was a hiring manager before that. And I embarrassingly did in fact ask these questions, which I'm not proud of, but I just looked them up and I practiced them. And every single question that I was asked in this 45 to an hour interview was exactly on this list, except for one. There was only one question that was not on there. So look up the most common ones and practice them. Go to day 14 of this series, the Rat Race Rut, and put together a brief tell me about yourself elevator speech, and then practice, because no doubt you're going to get asked that when you get to the interview. Also come to your interview prepared with some good questions. Again, a quick Google search will get you plenty. And I'm going to talk about a few, I think, in a minute here. Practice interviewing with a friend or a coach. Do a mock interview a few times. Believe me, the more that you practice that, being in that situation, versus if you haven't done it in years or maybe even decades, and then all of a sudden now you're in front of people, maybe in person, even on a camera, it's nerve-wracking. So practice, just have somebody ask you these 20 questions a few times and practice ahead of time. Always go high on the dress code. So if they say we're going to be in jeans and t-shirts, don't show up in jeans and a t-shirt. I'm not saying you have to wear a tuxedo, but just go a step above what they say. And by the way, it's okay to ask. It is okay to ask what the dress code is, right? Most people are just going to take the high road, and I think that's a good measure. I would rather show up in a nice suit or a nice blouse with a scarf and kind of made up, kind of like I am today, maybe a little bit more zhuzhed up. Than if I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt and found out that, that was a test, and hopefully not a test, but that they were, some of them were maybe in suits, or somebody showed up that you didn't think was, or they didn't think was going to show up. So go take the high road, and then bring a few copies of your resume. Yes, they absolutely should have them. You should have the resume, and they should have gotten copies to anybody who's at the interview. But guess what? It doesn't happen all the time. I've seen it. So be safe rather than sorry. And then I think this is one of the most important things. Confirm the location and the directions and access for an in-person interview. Super important. I don't know how many times I have heard of people, my husband, showing up and not knowing where to go. So get the address of the location and the phone number of a contact or a responsible person, that if you should run into issues, or maybe there's an accident on the highway and you're delayed, get that number so you can confirm and contact them if you need to. Find out where you park. Are there restrictions? Is there visitor parking? Is there construction going on? That's another one that people run into, like, oh shit, I didn't know. I can't go that way because there's construction. Which entrance to the building do I use if it's not obvious? And a lot of times it's not obvious. You might have 2, 3, 4, 5 seemingly obvious entrances to a bigger building. How do you enter the building? Is there a front guard? Are you going to have to get a visitor badge? What's the process? Is someone going to escort you? Where's the interview room if you're coming in on your own? How do you get there? Are there any navigation challenges, right? And then I would just bring a bottle of water. That's my last and final tip on interview prep, is bring a bottle of water, because you might get a little dry throat and you never know. Okay, let's talk about the interview itself. As I mentioned earlier, look up their 20 most common interview questions and practice answering them. You don't know what you're going to be asked, so just prepare for what's likely, right? You only know what you know, right? And I would just say most of the common questions suck. So if you get asked, like, what is your greatest weakness? I'm sorry, my condolences. It doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. Again, I asked that back in the day before I got a little bit more woke. If your to-be hiring manager is at the interview, consider asking them some of the common questions that are asked of you. Wouldn't you want to know? Ask your hiring manager if they've ever had an employee that they didn't get along with, and how did they handle it? Ask them what their greatest strength is. Of course, bring other questions like, what should you expect? What does success look like, etc. Again, Google questions, there's tons of them that you can bring for the hiring team. When you're in the interview, if you don't know the answer to a question, that's okay. I have been, as a hiring manager, in interviews with people who clearly lied or just tried to BS their way. I would rather somebody just say, I don't know. If the question's unclear, of course, ask for clarification. If you don't have direct experience to the question, but you have done something different, but sort of similar, different but similar, that you can maybe relate to that, talk about that. People do that all the time. Well, I haven't had experience with Service Suite, but I have had experience with whatever other application, which is similar, right? You can do that kind of thing. If you just plain don't know, or you don't have the experience, just say so. Don't try to lie or cover it up. You'll get caught, and it'll just not look good for you. If you get asked to do a personality assessment, which I have had to do once, I would consider that a big red flag. I did one. It was called the Wonderlic. It's just stupid. I actually studied for it, and it just like any test, it's just, I don't know, they're stupid, and it was crappy. That's all I'm going to say is personality assessments and stuff. They're fun, but I would consider it a red flag if I were asked to do that as part of an interview, because they're just not, super scientific, right? And depending on what the ones you do, and you could just be stressed and not being a very good test taker because you're already stressed out. If you get asked to do free work to demonstrate some skill or ability, be cautious. If it's something that you're doing during the interview, and there are some positions and roles where you would have to show some level of proficiency, right? And if it's done during the interview, that might be okay. But if they want you to come up with like a 50-page proposal for how you'd manage all of the clients in Southern California, I'd be on alert. And yes, I do know people who've been asked to basically come up with something that they can actually use. It's basically you're doing free work. So I would be very cautious about that. And I would end your questions. So you usually have the opportunity to ask questions. I would end those questions by asking about what are the next steps in the process, right? What happens? How long should it wait for you? Or how long should you wait to hear from the person about next steps? They should have some idea, right? If you're lucky, you'll get somebody, they're just on top of it, but probably you're not going to get lucky and it's going to be vague, but at least is it going to be 3 days or is it, usually they'll say, we're finishing up interviews this week, we're making a decision by end of next week, right? And then make sure you have contact information with the appropriate people because you might need that contact information later. So, just figure out what next steps are. Okay, how many interviews should you expect? These days, 1 to 12, and I'm not even lying. It's the interview process for some companies is just ridiculous. Excuse me. You can spend more time looking for a $500,000 house than you do on. You can spend more on doing interviews than you do like if you're buying like a $500,000 house. It's just insane, the amount. As a general rule, the higher up that you are, the position is that you're applying for, the more interviews that you might expect. So if you're entry level, it really should only be 1 or 2, really. If you're applying for like a senior VP or a president, it might be, triple that. The issue comes when you're like a mid-level person or an individual contributor, not even a manager, and you're expected to do 3, 4, 5 interviews with different teams. That's overkill. If you don't have smart enough managers who can perform an interview and make a decision in 1 or 2 interviews, you either need new managers or you need a new process. And I don't have a whole lot to say about this, except shame on you for the companies that make people go through, 4, 5, 6 interviews when they're applying for a mid-level. It's just ridiculous. All right. And then lastly, my favorite, you never hear anything back one way or another. And unfortunately, this is all too common. The most egregious behavior for me comes after you've had your official interview or maybe multiple interviews and you never hear anything again ever. You're just ghosted. You did everything right. You sent a nice thank you to the hiring manager. You provided everything that they asked for, and then they ghost you. And this is why I say get contact information before or during the interview. And if you do have that contact information, it is absolutely appropriate to follow up if you've not heard anything. If you follow up, like you email your hiring manager directly and ask politely, can you give me a status? And they don't say anything to you, scratch that company off your list, right? I mean, it does take time to get through the process, but a good company will make sure to give you good communication. So follow up based on whatever they said in the interview. If they said it's going to be, they're going to make a decision in 2 weeks and 2 weeks comes and you haven't heard, things are always delayed. So send a message or give them a call and ask them when they're making a decision. And hopefully they'll give you an honest answer. Either so sorry, probably what it is so sorry we had a whatever crisis. That was when I was at the utility company. So sorry, we had a week-long ice storm, so we haven't done anything. We're going to push this out, right? It happens, but they should at least let you know. And if they do ghost you to like totally, you know what? Good riddance. You don't want to work for that company. And don't forget, there are places that you can rate companies on their hiring practices, like Glassdoor, right? And I've done it. Okay, deep breath. Whew. So much on job hunting. This is going to be a long one, right? I apologize, but I only put a small dent into it. We haven't even, there's so much we could break down here. Of course, if I can help in any way, please reach out in a private message or go to bethancampbell.com/coachme. I do not see any comments and feedback on this early Sunday morning. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about, oh my God, it's our last session tomorrow, and I'm going to do a wrap up, and I'm going to address any questions or feedback that I've gotten since our last Q&A session. But I'm also going to cover my top 5 of these sessions that I think are the biggest impact to why you are not finding career fulfillment. So that'll be a good one. All right, don't forget to connect with me here on Facebook or LinkedIn. If you are watching the replay on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining Get Out of the Rat Race Rut. You are here because you are a badass. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I shall see you tomorrow. Praise bacon.